Hello, and welcome to Fort Vancouver Regional Library's 2024 Revolutionary Reads series. This year's series focused on the book Free: 2 Years, 6 Lives, and the Long Journey Home by Lauren Kessler. This year's program was built in partnership with our community organization, the Foundation, Restore and Prepare, and is made possible through generous support by the FVRL Foundation. Thank you for your interest in this program, and as always, thank you for using your public library. Revolutionary Reads is an annual community reads program with the goal of galvanizing the Southwest Washington community to read the same book on a topic of revolutionary importance. Revolutionary is defined as involving or causing a complete and dramatic change, and or radically new or innovative, outside or beyond established procedure, principles, etc. The 2024 program focuses on the experience of incarceration and reentry. This series will explore the challenges, systems, and supports that exist in Southwest Washington for those returning home.
Well, welcome to our program tonight. We are really happy to have Amber Sirstad here, who is a counselor herself, and she has done a lot of counseling in jails. And I've heard some of her interesting stories, and I think you'll find them interesting as well. And she's also been a part of some of the studies or got some of the information from some of the studies they've done in jails to help those that are incarcerated as they try to integrate back into society. And some of the things, simple things that we may not think about can be very, very helpful. And so I'm sure you're anxious to hear all about them tonight. So help me welcome Amber Sirstad.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Just 1 second. Get situated. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I do want to give a disclaimer for those watching and those here in person. I do have lung disease, and so that limits currently my voice coming out and my air coming out. So if it sounds like I'm gasping for breath, it's because I am gasping for breath. So you might hear a lot of air noises coming through pretty strongly. So just a heads up for that. Thank you to Jamie and Sherry. I appreciate you guys having me come and talk about this. This is a topic that is very, very near and dear to my heart. And just to give you a little bit of background, educational and professional work, I got into a master's program in counseling in 2014 and graduated at the end of 2016. And got my master's in professional clinical mental health counseling. And I did my graduate internship at the Washington County Jail over in Hillsboro, Oregon. And it was the best 13 months of my work career. Then just shortly after that, so I graduated in December, and my goal post-graduation was to become a crisis counselor, eventually, crisis and trauma counselor. And I was thinking it was going to be like 5-10 years down the road. Well, 3 months later, I get a call, and I just put out like 50 different applications all over the place, just trying to get my foot in the door. And I get a call from a facility, and they said, we got your application, and we'd love to have you come in and have an interview. And I remember I was driving down the road, and so I pulled over for a phone call, and I said, yeah, that sounds great, I'll be there. And then before we hung up, I said, what company is this for? I just put an application everywhere. And this lady is like, it's for Lines for Life. I was like, okay, great, thanks. I hung up the phone and I said, what is Lines for Life? So I Googled Lines for Life, and it was the Oregon chapter of the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. And so I went into this interview, and I got the position right away. And I started right away as a crisis counselor, which was 3 months post-grad. Fantastic. I still am there on call, so I just jump in a couple hours a week. My full-time job right now is I work in Salem. I'm co-owner of a private practice, therapy practice in Salem, Oregon. And right now we have about 15, 16 employees and 4 owners. And we have an internship program where we bring in graduate level counselors and they do their internship with us and graduate and become great counselors. So, like I said, I spent 13 months at the jail. And that gave me a really, really deep love for corrections, Department of Corrections. And I tried to get into a couple different facilities. Post-grad didn't work because I wasn't licensed yet. And the state penitentiary, I had an interview there, but they really wanted you to be licensed, rightly so, with more experience. And so I put that on pause, but that's where my heart's at, is in corrections. And someday I will get back there. At the jail, I was probably my second week into my internship, second, third week maybe. I was asked to do an interview or an assessment with this gentleman. And my boss gave me the file to just kind of look over it briefly. And so I opened up the file, and I'm scanning, you know, just his history. And I went to the page where it has all the charges and the crimes that was charged against him. And right away, I slammed it shut, slammed it on the table and said, nope, and I walked out. Well, my boss at that time was not very happy with my response. But that day, she taught me probably one of the most important lessons and most powerful lessons that provided me not only with the ability to continue working in corrections, but also made my experience there the best 13 months of my work career. She told me that if I tried, that I could empathize with just about anyone. And at that moment in my mind, I mean, I was very, very young back then. I was 25 years old, I was a baby, and very inexperienced. In my mind, I was ready to take over the world and do all this great work. But so she told me, she said, think of, rather than thinking of in the moment, you're sitting with this individual and you're thinking of all the crimes that he or she has committed, rather than thinking of in the moment, think back before the crimes. Think back to childhood. And if you can think back to childhood, probably, I mean, I know there's not a lot of absolutes in mental health, but in my clinical opinion, probably one of the biggest absolutes is that people that enter into corrections either enter in with trauma or legal trauma, or both, oftentimes both. So she said, if you can think of this gentleman, look at this gentleman, and if you can think of this gentleman before he started doing all his stuff and in his childhood, that is going to be a key to empathize. Because most of the people that are in prisons were severely abused as young kids, and we could all hopefully be able to empathize with that. Come on in. Hello, hello.
Hi.
Hi. So inviting a couple more people in. So I know that we understand that when actions are committed, that we have to deal with the consequences. Nobody's saying that because of trauma, we don't need to deal with this. We learn from a very, very young age. As a kid, if I stole candy from a store, my parents would make me go back to the store owners and apologize. We deal with the consequences, but for us as helpers, when we think of these people, these individuals that have had so much trauma in their life, that rather than focusing on the bad, rather than focusing on the negative, the intenseness of the situation, like I said just a few minutes ago, trying to get your brain to go back to what what was going on in childhood. And that's gonna be probably one of the biggest keys to empathy, honestly, because, I mean, who can't empathize with a little child? I mean, the librarians, I'm sure, with the kiddos all of the time, and they're cute. Sometimes not so cute, but a lot of times they're cute. Most of the time, yeah. But understanding that with a good support team and a good professional trauma-informed trained therapist, that people don't have to continue living the way that they used to. Meaning that when they when they become incarcerated, that when they leave, they don't have to go back. The recidivism rate is very, very high. And in our book, Free, it talks about, there's a lot of stats in there. Really, really well-read book. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's very, very good.
Yay.
And pushing pause on what I'm talking about, when I was telling Sherry this, first started to read the book, first chapter, she was talking about, I think it was, Oregon Department of Corrections, in Salem, and I think Sterling or Arnoldo, one of those guys, and then the yellow fire hydrant outside. Yes, remember that. And I work 2-3 miles from there. And so I know exactly what she's talking about.
That's
So
awesome.
to be able to put that picture in my mind was just, it really, really set up the whole book. It was just fantastic. So good job, author. Appreciate that. I know it's probably been stated at previous talks, but some of the biggest things of those reentering from corrections into society it's very, very common. You have your medical, your mental health, you have your housing, your employment, and your social supports. Those are going to be the biggest, and probably the most biggest out of that is going to be your housing, because without stable housing, you don't have any sense of consistency, like the book was talking about. And that is super duper important. And having not just a roof over your head, but having a safe place with safe people and a safe environment. To paint a very, very common scenario, let's take Joe. And I picked Joe just because it's a fun name, not anything specific. Pick Joe. Joe gets released from prison or jail. Joe has little to no family or friend support. So no one picks him up upon release. And he only has the clothes on his back and maybe just a couple dollars. No cell phone. No transitional housing was set up for him prior to release. And since he doesn't have enough money for even a bus ticket, and definitely not an Uber, he has to walk. Well, unfortunately, there are no emergency shelters nearby, so he is forced to sleep outside. And he doesn't get a solid night's sleep and is getting hungry since he doesn't have enough money for food. He attempts to go to multiple places to find a job, but since they hear of his record, they decline employment. And at some point, Joe knows that he has to eat. So he either steals for survival or possibly gets back into the drug world for survival. And he ends up back in corrections. And it just becomes a revolving door. I mean, this is something that happens every single day. In my 13 months at the jail, I can't tell you how many inmates I worked with that they would be released 3-4 weeks later. I would see them walking down the door or walking down the hallway. And the first time I saw that, I was in the library and I look out the window and one of the guys are walking down. I jumped up so quickly. I was so hot. I was so mad. We worked so hard together, you know, not understanding that social support is huge and getting solid support care. And he just didn't have it lined up upon reentry. And so that's another thing that my boss had to sit down with me. Amber, I know you want to change the world, but you need to slow down and just kind of get used to some of this stuff. But I didn't want to get used to it. I didn't want to get used to seeing people just coming in and out, in and out. But another big, really, really big piece about that is that, like the revolving door, is a lot of times people would leave jail, during that time, and especially during cold season. If they didn't have somewhere to stay, they would purposely do something to get caught again, so they can go back into jail, because they knew for sure that they would have a bed to sleep in, that they would have food. And I say food, because corrections food is not very enjoyable. They asked me one time if I would like to eat supper there. Absolutely not. There's a McDonald's right down the road. I'm good, thanks. But they know that they will get something in their stomach, and that they will get a shower a couple times a week. And so they do things to purposely get back in there. Which is sad to think about, but also makes sense when you think about that. I want to talk about briefly, not too long, but talk about something that SAMHSA, which SAMHSA stands for Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. They came up with a 3-intervention model. And I want to touch base on that. These are not my words as far as the topics, not my lingo, so I'll be referencing SAMHSA. I didn't develop them, but they are fantastic. And the first intervention is substance abuse related medication. So there are some people who are able to kick the habit, so to speak, by themselves. And when they do that, that's fantastic. But it's super, super common for people to need a lot of support. And one of those avenues is medication. And so upon reentry, if we get somebody connected, somebody that does have a substance use disorder, getting them connected to a medical team, mental health team, to where they can get on this medication this right out the door, then that's gonna really give them a leg up. The second one is case management. So I want to read the definition that SAMHSA gives for case management, because when I say case management, at least for me, I have this certain picture pops into my mind of what that looks like. And so I'm going to read the definition just so we can all be on the same page. A coordinated approach to delivering and linking clients to health, substance use, mental health, and social services, however appropriate, to address clients' specific needs and achieve stated goals. So that's what a case manager typically is supposed to do. Is that what a case manager always does? Unfortunately not. And we just don't have the resources to tailor every single inmate and to come up with a set treatment plan for every single person that's targeted specifically to them. It would be fantastic if we did, but we just don't currently. So unfortunately, like I said, this definition of case management is not one that is effectively used, but I do believe that we can get better, we can grow. Imagine a world where you have, in a perfect world, you have a medical doctor, you have an MD, you have a mental health therapist, you have a substance use therapist, you have a housing representative and an employment representative. So you have 5 people. And each inmate that is being released is assigned to a team of 5 people. And then this team of 5 people has 20 people on their caseload for about a 6-month period to a year, maybe, of that inmate being released. And then they just rotate. And all that team did was focus on those 20 people. Imagine the recidivism rate and how powerfully impacted that would be. Can we do that? No. It's like I said, it's a perfect world. Well, in a perfect world, we wouldn't have this conversation, I don't think. But so it would be fantastic to be able to do that and to be able to have dedicated team members, and not just like, you have one doctor that has a caseload of 500 people, another social services social worker that has a caseload of 600 people, which is very common. And that means that they can only see one of their clients once every several months.
Wow.
That is not enough to be able to make that big of an impact. Maybe someday. And the thing about and I'm not dogging on doctors or social workers or anything like that, but there's so many people to so little staff members. The ratio is wild. And so, and the staff or the support members that are currently working, since there's so few, they work their bums off and work super, super, super duper hard. And then burnout happens. Burnout is all over the place. I've seen it in crisis work. It happens very, very frequently. And so you work super, 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 super hard. And then as a staff person, you need your own support because life just gets too intense.
Right.
So it would be nice if we could hire a bunch of new people, but there's funding, there's grants, and that only goes so far, being able to pay for support people. The third intervention that I want to talk about really quickly is peer navigation. So case management and peer navigation is in the same family-ish, maybe cousins perhaps. Case managers help people navigate the healthcare system, which can be very, very daunting. I mean, it can be very daunting for me, much less somebody who's been, who has seen the outside of the four walls of a prison for 20 plus years. That's a very, very big, scary world. And so patient navigators or case managers help out with that. Well, then you have your peer navigation, which is done by peers. And with the social support that's done by peers, AA is a big one. That's like a peer support group style. It's significantly more connectional. Is that a word? Connectional?
It is now.
It is now. I love it. Relational. Yes, connectional. That's so, hold on. I can't write that down. That's such a good word. Connectional. Cool. It's much more connectional. Relational, sorry. And then most of the time done with shared experiences, which also goes significantly far. Totally side note. I was talking with an individual in the cancer world, and she was a staff member at a cancer retreat, and somebody had come in to do a whole entire day of talking. The survivors went, and it was a whole, they had like spa day, and they had self-care stuff, and it was really, really nice. So this individual comes in and talks about like some medical aspects. Well, the speaker was not a cancer survivor, and the speaker was giving some very, very wrong information. And it was being just very, very logistical, and there was no empathy there, and there was no emotion. And if you know cancer is very emotional. And so that individual who was on staff, she came and talked to me, and she said, that gave me such a motivation to do what she was doing, because she was my person was a cancer survivor. And it just goes to show that empathy and being able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. So being able to connect cancer survivor to your cancer survivor is massive compared to somebody who has read some specific information online but doesn't actually understand the ins and outs of that world. Right? When you think of the individual as a whole, so you have the holistic, so mind, body, and soul, all three of these interventions work together. So you have the emotional, mental health side, which would be kind of peer support. And then you have medical side of the body, which would be, or the physical side, which would be medication related support. And then case management brings in the social support of an individual. and a research associate from New York that works in substance abuse said, I really believe we can do a lot of important work while they're in custody. And it can fall apart if we don't have the right supports and safety nets in place to support them, and to support their successful reentry. And so I think that going back to the title of this, which is Bridging Mental Health Gaps in Reentry, I think a very, very big piece of that is starting in correction. Well, technically, actually starting in childhood. But starting in corrections, doing a lot of work in corrections, and then doing kind of like a warm transfer, warm handoff, and going into reentry. And because if you go into reentry and you're not prepared, see you in 10 minutes. Like that's pretty cold and hard to say, but at the same time, that's often reality. And another thing about reentry is it's important to start your planning as soon as possible, which I think the book mentioned that a little bit. And for some people, it's easy to do that because you have a date. My date is 6 months from tomorrow or a year or whatever. Other people, you have 12 hours. They give you very, very short working time. And so to get all of these things lined up is super, super, super hard, making it for reentry being a significantly more difficult process. I talked with one of my employees who works in a prison currently, and she said that she's worked in corrections for years, and she said that people come into prison with trauma and then leave with trauma. And like trauma. And of course, I'm sure we can imagine what some of those traumas look like, but she told me the top two biggest traumas of people in corrections is sexual trauma and food trauma. I was super curious about this one. I mean, we all know correction food is not enjoyable. But for me to think of big traumas that coming out with this big trauma, for it to be a food-related trauma, I had to spend some time really thinking that through and kind of fleshing it out a little bit. And it's true, like you have somebody who has been in prison for 20, 30 years, eating the same thing, not really nutritional, not fresh food. And then they come out, if they go out to Applebee's and orders 5 big meals, that's gonna tear up their body. And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done around that, a lot of emotional work, because food is a very emotional thing, emotional eating. My ice cream is my go-to. But that's for everything. Like if I had a good day, I want to eat ice cream. If I had a trash day, I want to eat ice cream. If I'm bored, well, let's drink ice cream. So I get emotional eating. It's fantastic. But anyway, so when people leave corrections or jail or prison, no mental health support, no medical support, no family support, they go back to the exact same place. They go to the same hangouts, they go back to the same drug world, gang world, and then they typically, most of the time, end up back in corrections at some point. Is rehabilitating someone an easy task? Absolutely not. I'm glad you asked. No, it's not. Unconditional love is rarely easy, if ever. I have a niece and I love her to death, but Auntie Amber, why do we do this? Baby, just because. But Auntie Amber, why? Because that's just how it is. But why? But then, why? Oh, baby, I love you, but stop talking. So, unconditional love sometimes it's very hard. And then I have 2 nephews, they're dog nephews. I call them nephews. I have 2 little dog nephews. and they bark, 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 bark. And, if they decide to use the restroom in the house, my unconditional love becomes very conditional, very, very quickly. But even just a little bit of empathy goes so far. And it means the world. And it'll take time, when you're working with inmates, it'll take time to break through the exterior, and rightly so. Because inmates, when they're in that type of facility, that type of environment, they have no other choice but to be hard. They have to be hard for survival. And when I started working as a fresh trained new counselor, I was ready to go out and change the world and conquer the world, one inmate at a time. And I was talking with my boss and sitting down so excited about all these different theories that I was gonna use and you know, how I wanted to get down at the childhood trauma of all of these guys and you know, fix them and cure them and all this different stuff. And she said, well, she pulled my coattail so fast. She said, calm down. First of all, no. And then she said, you are allowed to use one theory and one theory only. And it, at that point, was a very, very boring one, and it was cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. I use that all the time now, but back then, to me, it just seemed boring. It's like, I could go much deeper with all these psychodynamic, psychoanalytical stuff. And she told me, she's like, no, all you can use is CBT, and I said, okay. And asked her why, and she said, if you go and you use deeper stuff and you get them to talk about childhood trauma, and 30 minutes down the road, you're gonna have to just send them back to their pod, send them back to their cell with their soul wide open. That is the most unethical thing you could do at that time as a counselor. Because then they're gonna go and in a environment where they're supposed to be hard and they need to have that rough exterior to protect themselves, if they walk in crying or with tears down their eyes, no, so not good stuff. So in my young, inexperienced mind, I started to think at that moment, well, then why am I even here? What's the point of why am I here? And fast forward to 2 years post my time at the jail. This is why I was there. I was walking into a public event, and next to the entrance door was this gentleman, and he was looking at me with the biggest smile on his face. And I just kind of nodded his head, and that's just what he did. And I smiled back at him, and I kept walking, and I looked at the corner of my eye, and he was still staring at me, smiling with the biggest smile. So I stopped and I stared at him. And I was now interested to see who's gonna break eye contact first. So I was committed. It was about a solid 25 seconds of staring at each other. And then I gasped super loud. And I quickly walked up to him. And I apologized at first that I didn't recognize him, because the last time I had seen this man, he was in an orange jumpsuit with a beard. This time he was clean shaven and wearing a suit and tie. I did not recognize him at all, except for his head bobbing up and down and his teeth, actually. And so I talked to him, and I inquired about what he was doing with his life, how he was doing, and he credited the success back to our 45-minute appointments once a week for about 5 months. And without going into detail about what we talked about, it basically boiled down to the power of creating a non-judgmental, safe environment for someone to just be. There doesn't have to be any type of agenda. There doesn't have to be any type of schedule. If you can provide that safe space and be that safe container for someone just to be. That is probably one of the most powerful things. And you don't even need to go to 500 years of schooling like I did to do that. You could just be a good human being. You should still judge. Unfortunately, that's easier said than done. Cool. We are going to take a very sharp turn with our topic. And we're going to talk about chess therapy. I'm so excited about that. Yes, you heard it right. Chess therapy. A number of years ago, I was introducing this to another clinician and I said, chess therapy, blah, 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 blah. And they stared at me just with blankest of looks. And I said, chess, you know, chess therapy, board game. Oh, chess therapy. I thought you meant chest therapy. I was like, girl, I would have got my license taken away. Absolutely not. Chess therapy dates all the way back to the 19th century, or sorry, to the 9th century, many years ago, in Baghdad, actually. And it's not something new, even though probably most people have not heard about it. It's different than play therapy. So a lot of people, you have your play therapist, and they will bring in games to incorporate into play therapy, and they'll oftentimes use that, but they won't do specific maneuvers on the chessboard. So that's kind of where it stands apart. In corrections, chess is super common in corrections. A lot of guys play it, but understanding what chess can do as far as the power of utilizing the chessboard and how it can help inmates in corrections is not super common. Chess, believe it or not, is not just an old boring board game. It can be very exciting if played correctly or incorrectly, either way. It just depends on your personality, I suppose. One of the biggest draws to playing chess in corrections is socializing in a safe way. But research shows, there's a lot of stats out there actually, that it can reduce and decrease anxiety, depression, and stress. They're super big. Has anybody heard of the movie Life of the King? Yes, one person. There's a movie, Life of the King. It's a chess themed movie. I would highly recommend it. I absolutely love this. Go watch it tonight and your life will forever be changed. It is really good. Some of the pros of chess, just to go over a couple, is it teaches you patience. So a lot of us are thinking, oh, well, I might start to get into this, learn a little bit of patience. It teaches you patience, critical thinking skills, decision-making, and consequences. Once you take your piece off that board, or off that piece, once you take your hand off that piece, boom, you're like, you have to, whatever the consequences, you have to deal with it. And it teaches the player to think logically rather than emotionally. Sometimes we do need emotions, a lot of times we do need emotions, but sometimes when dealing and navigating the world, we need logic. And I have played with people who have played emotionally, and it's actually very interesting because you can determine, if you know that individual, you can determine their next move based off of their emotions, which is fascinating. Another strong component of chess therapy is the effectiveness that it has with people with ADHD, especially kids. It's very big with kids. Self-control is a very big piece, along with consequences and decision-making. To play a slower game of chess, you have to have patience and wait for the other person. So it teaches you patience, because sometimes if you're an impatient person and you're playing with somebody who does not really know the game of chess, you're going to move and you already know 5 moves ahead for yourself, but they're trying to figure out the board. And it can take up to 2 minutes sometimes for somebody to think through what move they want to do. And so it can get pretty, you can get pretty antsy. So it teaches a lot of self-control that. area. It's a common belief with chess. Now, does anybody know how to play chess here? One person?
I'm not allowed to play chess, but I do know how to play it.
I'm not allowed to play chess. There's a story.
There's a story.
I get all the pawns to like form a
the
union,
alliance.
and then, yeah.
Yeah, you're a fun person.
Yeah.
Got it. So it's a common belief that you do not bring queen out right away. However, you can if you're super, super, super good. If you're like a chess master, you can bring it out right away and actually win the game in 3 moves. However, most people are not. But so it's a known belief that you do not bring queenie out. And you keep queen and king protected in the back, and you have the pawns up front, and everybody guards it. And then about halfway through the game, in the mid game, you bring queen out. Well, I was working with an individual who I love this story. Working with an individual who I was using, they were going through some pretty intense, significant health concerns. And they had a lot of angry outbursts, and they did not know how to handle their anger and their health. It's terminal disease. And so obviously it made 100% sense. But I was asked to help this person to be able to manage their anger. And it's like, well, I've been whatever. I could go down a whole clinical piece, which I won't. But so to manage their anger, so where they just don't start screaming and yelling at everybody and hurting people. I said, okay, so I started working with this individual, and I had gone through several different routes, several different targets, but then I said, okay, this is what we're gonna do. I'm gonna target his angry outbursts. But first, I need to see how quickly he goes from 0 to 100. And so I was white, so I went first. I moved my pawn up 1 in front of the queen, and he went, and then I moved the pawn in front of the king up 2, and then he went, and then I brought out queen, just boom, right out of the gate. He went from 0 to 100 so fast. He was not a happy person. And it was it was very, very therapeutic because I was able to witness, okay, how quick does he come out of the gate swinging? Very, very quick. And so we had spent about 2 months, once a week, we would play, and every single time I would bring out queenie right out of sometimes it was after the second move, sometimes it was after the third move. And even though he knew that it was my risk, I was risking losing my queen early on. He still was not happy. He didn't get it. He didn't understand that I make my own decisions, that I have to deal with the consequences. So it just was very, very upsetting to him. And so we spent 2 months, and all we did was focus on the anger. And then after about 2 months of this, we were able to sit and have a whole entire game where I was bringing out queenie, and he wouldn't even bat an eye. He would just soar through the game and focus on every piece. I would make some other ridiculous moves that normally I would not, but I just wanted to test the waters a little bit. And he was totally chill. And a little bit later, mom had reported, because this was a kiddo, mom had reported to me that his angry outbursts had significantly come down, and he was able to stop and breathe and look at the situation before he just went from 0 to 100. And that was just out of the game of chess, which I absolutely love. The next thing, so that's something, I could talk about chess therapy all day long, but I'm gonna jump on to the next one. This is the last topic, and this is super fun. Music therapy. This is fantastic. another fantastic way to connect with people. Now, I am not a certified music therapist, but I do use several techniques. And I use piano and guitar a little bit, but my favorite one to use with clients is beatbox.
Yes.
Does anybody beatbox?
No, I love it.
Beatboxing, if you don't know what that is, it's making noise with your mouth. Rhythmic noises, not just noise, rhythmic noises with your mouth. I have two stories that stand out to me when it comes to utilizing the power of music, specifically beatboxing. This gentleman was in corrections, who's in jail, and I've been working with him for, probably 8 months maybe. He's in his late 20s, very, very rough exterior, rightly so. He had been burned a lot in life, emotionally and physically hurt, and a lot of trauma, a lot of drugs, a lot of alcohol. So we had been meeting for months with absolutely nothing. I did not feel like I felt like I knew the exact same amount of stuff about him after month 4 than I did going back to day 1. He talked a lot without telling me anything, if that makes sense. Words came out of his mouth a lot because that meant time out of his cell. It was free time. Of course I'll go to therapy. It means I get out of his cell, yes. But even after, like I said, even after several months, I do the exact same from month 4 compared to the first day that I met him. And we hadn't talked about music, we hadn't talked about songs, we hadn't talked about things with lyrics, anything along those lines. But this one day I decided to inquire about his love and interest in music. And I tried just about everything I could, given the environment, to connect with him. There's so many different topics that I just tried to connect with this gentleman over. Nothing was working. And then we're sitting there, and I'm a very laid back therapist, and in training, we're taught to keep both of our feet flat on the ground. Now I have an ottoman in my office that I put my feet up, I take my shoes off, I put my blanket over my lap, because when I'm comfortable, you're gonna get significantly more attention from me than if I'm just sitting there super awkward and uncomfortable. Anyway, so we were in the library, and there was a bookshelf. We had a small table against the bookshelf, and there were rows of, bookshelves or whatever, metal. And so I'm sitting on one side of the table, he's sitting on the other side, and I'm like kicked back in the chair. I have my feet crossed up on the bookshelf. I'm just chilling, and we're not talking. We're probably there for like 20 minutes, just silent. I wasn't concerned. I was like, he has free time, whatever, it's fine. So then I asked this random question. I said, "Are you a musician by any chance?" His body did not move at all, but his eyes instantly went from staring at the ground to making eye contact with me right away. Boom. That's what I needed. Thank you. And he says, yes. And I was like, okay, great. That's what it is. That was the connection. That I had spent 4 months, and I don't know why it took me so long to bring up music, but 4 months, then there was. So I asked what instrument he played, and he said that he sang and played piano. Well, we didn't have access to a keyboard, unfortunately, at that time, but we did have someone who could beatbox. And I asked if he would like to sing, and he noted that it would be comfortable if I just sat there and stared at him, which I get. So I asked him to give me a tempo. And so he started snapping his fingers, and I laid a basic beat, and his eyes get so big. And back then, I mean, I was, he's sitting across the table from, my hair used to be like down to here. Before I got sick and lost it all. So I had just long hair and sitting there, kick my feet up on the bookshelf, start beatboxing, and his eyes like, what in the world is going on? So he starts to sing. And in my mind, I was thinking that he would do some type of rap. Honestly, that's what I was expecting. Some type of freestyle thing, but he started to sing something that actually had a very, very soft, mellow melody to it. And then I sat up and put my feet on the ground and I'm doing it and he's singing and he has his eyes closed and I wanted to close my eyes, but I couldn't because I needed to know the room. And because we were in a locked room, well, not locked at the time, but we were in a room together. And so I just need to keep my eyes open. So I turn my head and there's a window and one of the officers he's standing there watching me beatbox and watching the inmate close his eyes and he's just in a completely other world, which was one of the most beautiful things and it's priceless. It's fantastic. The second one, this did not take place in corrections, but rather at my job at the suicide hotline that I talked about at the very beginning. I was fresh out of graduate school, having no idea how I landed this job. And I was sitting, I got it in March, so this is probably April of 2017. And I'm talking on the phone with this gentleman that's his anxiety is sky high, not suicidal, but very, very high anxiety. And I tried everything. I tried all of the breathing exercises you can think of, all of the grounding exercises, try and run your hand under hot water. Didn't work. Okay, try and run your hand under cold water. Because I have a whole pamphlet of, things to have the person try, it's very new. Curing the world one person at a time. So I thought I was doing. I quickly learned that was not reality. Anyway, so, from a scale of 1 to 10, his anxiety was a 38. And so then I remembered, okay, there's one trick on my sleeve that I have not pulled. I'm gonna pull this trick out, see if it goes anywhere. So I said, sir, I have a super, super random question, and I know it may sound so confusing to you. And he was like, go for it. And I said, are you a musician? And he said, how did you know? And I said, oh, just years in the field. I could hear a musician. No musician when I hear him. And he was like, yeah, I play piano and he did some percussion. And I said, okay, do you beatbox by any chance? And he says, well, a little bit, yeah. I said, okay, do you like to do accompaniment to beatboxing? He said, well, I haven't tried it, but I'll try it. And I said, okay. So I had the landline phone. So I picked up my headset, put it on, put the landline down, and I went over, and this is a room of all little cubicles, thank you, phone stations and computers. And so I go over in the corner, and I'm sitting in the corner on his chair against the corner, and I have my hands over one ear, or hands over this ear, and the mouthpiece is right here, and I'm covering this ear, and I start to beatbox, and I'm just going, beatboxing, probably for a solid 5 minutes, and probably halfway through it, I open my eyes, and there's 3 or 4 people staring at me. What in the world is this girl doing? We're suicide hotline. She's sitting here making drum beats. And so, of course, I had to turn around and not focus on that because client first, call it first. It just has to be therapeutic, which it was. So we spent about 5 minutes doing that, and I stopped because I wanted to check in with him. And after a few minutes, he let me know with the sound of tears in his voice, that connection of me being able to connect. He was miles and miles and miles, different state. And he was able to pick up the phone, and he said that his anxiety, just from being able to focus on that music, focus on that rhythm, on that beat, and in corrections, sometimes that's all that there is making drum beats with your mouth, or using, pencils or whatever, and using the countertops, things like that. But if you get that beat going and you already have the melody in your head, and you can start singing it, music is one of the most powerful tools. And it's one thing that activates every single part of your brain at the same time, which is so powerful. And you hear stories of people with Alzheimer's and dementia and things, and they start to play music or hear music, and then all of a sudden they remember lyrics from back when they were 5 years old. It's a very, very powerful thing. And so connecting with people, it's a very powerful thing to check out. And you can even do it and not be a musician. There's ways to do that too. A lot of different stuff. But the various stories that I have talked about today, along with some of the textbook style lectures information, all supports the fact that taking time, thinking outside the box, and really zeroing in and honing in on someone who has been hurt and abused and traumatized goes so far. And is this always an easy thing? Is it always easy to sit and have an emotional connection with somebody? No. Is it always easy to empathize with somebody? No. It can be hard. It can definitely be hard to be nice to those who have been the abuser. It's a hard thing. And it can seem impossible to sit with someone who, by legal standards, should be in prison. But when I think of that, and I'm almost done here, when I think of that, I can't help but think of myself. No, I haven't. I know I don't have a record. I've never been arrested. I've never been on drugs. I've never drank alcohol. But even though I have dedicated my life to supporting those who are in pain and grieving, I know that I myself have said some pretty hurtful things. And, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt is a bunch of garbage. Words can often hurt more than a broken bone. I've had broken bones. They've obviously hurt, but I've also had words hurt even more. And I know for myself that I have not always been the most loving for myself, but yet people still love. And many, many years ago, I say many years ago, it's super emotional, I'm not getting into it, but there was this individual, a situation came up, and in order for, without going into the details, in order for me to live, this individual needed basically to die. That sounds weird, but it was, they had to kind of sacrifice their life for me, and they did. And so because of that, I am able to stand up here, and I'm able to, love people as unconditional as I can, but sometimes conditional, because you bug me a lot. Unconditioned turns very much to condition. I'm joking. But I'm able to walk with people through very dark times. I'm a grief counselor now, so I do a lot of terminal illness counseling, and it's a hard thing, but if you've been gifted that skill and that ability to love people and to meet people where they're at in the darkest of days, consider that an honor and a blessing, because it doesn't come easy. And some people aren't always able to get to that level. So if that's you, I thank you for that. And with that being said, is there any questions that anybody has? No pressure.
That was great. I'm gonna check online. That was great.
Yeah.
Or any comments that they want to make, it doesn't need to be a question.
Okay, so we do have a couple online. Have you tried volunteering at a prison?
Have I tried volunteering? I was set up to do a chess program. And like 2 steps before the finality, I was unable to finish it. It was a little bit before COVID. And so obviously at COVID, that shut everything down. So I started the process, but I was unable to do it. But at some point,
Our online attendee is encouraging you to just like, please do.
please do.
And then the other one online, and then we'll get to the ones in the room. What are some needed boundaries to set with a family member who is reentering into society while also cultivating connection and establishing trust?
That's a loaded question.
Well, that's gotta be tricky. I mean, when it's your family too.
Yeah, because I mean, I can make stuff up, honestly, like I could say something, but everybody's personality is gonna be vastly different.
Mhm.
And I mean, even, yeah, it's hard to give an answer because of the difference of personalities and the difference of history. Like, what's your family history like? Have you always had that ability to have boundaries? How has your relationship been like with this person? Overall, I mean, yes, it's obvious that there does need to be boundaries because you can be, manipulation is a big thing. Manipulation is a skill that a lot of people learn in corrections, and maybe without even realizing it, they bring it out into society. And so being able, like, I've heard of people trying to lay those boundaries, and as soon as those boundaries are crossed, you're out of here. Are they doing that in hatred? I don't know, some people might, but I don't think so. I think that you just have to, especially if there's other people living in the home, if there's kids living in the home, young people living in the home, elderly, there's a bunch of different caveats to that.
Okay, one more. Assuming you see clients after incarceration, how do they find you?
Google.com. So there's a big website. Some people like it, some people don't. It's called Psychology Today. It can be helpful, but I'll just explain. The reason why people don't like it, because they typically have to call about 20 to 30 people before making any connection. So it's a very, very, very big time consuming project, but I've been connected with several people through Psychology Today, and it has been a life-changing connection and support for that individual. So if you're able to get connected with the right people, that's fantastic. But so Psychology Today, Google, honestly, if you just go on Google and you put in like the type of therapist, so let's say you want a trauma therapist, trauma therapist in Vancouver, Washington, or for me, trauma therapist in Salem, Oregon. And then it'll come up with the big list.
They also want to know if you're accepting new clients.
That's fantastic. Oh, this is a networking thing.
Yes, it is.
Cool. Well, yes, the answer is yes, I am. The difficulty about that is the state lines.
Yes.
So I am only licensed in Oregon. So the individual has to physically be in Oregon. Now, they can live in Washington and just travel across the state line. And I do telehealth I do phone calls. And so honestly, like you would, just go across the Columbia River, or go all the way down to Salem if that worked as well. But yes, you have to physically be in Salem. Yes, I am accepting new clients.
Well, this person actually works. I actually know her. She's been to some of our book groups. She works in prison and could send in Oregon and could be sending me clients. I'm gonna, I'm going to send, contact information.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Are there questions in the room?
I have a question about chest therapy. When you start seeing it's probably different for, like, you mentioned music therapy that, you don't necessarily have to be a musician in order for it to help you or whatever. In chest, I'm assuming that you need to know some kind of chest.
Yes.
In order for it to really be effective or whatever. But what is your, what makes you decide that chest therapy is, it's probably not your go-to right out of the gate, right? Or is it?
It depends. So on a couple of different websites, I market myself as doing chest therapy. So if somebody comes in and they want to do chest therapy right out of the gate, I will happily do that. If they don't, then depending on the type of person, like if they're a more intellectual person, I have done it with several people on the spectrum, and that has worked well. But if they do a lot of logical thinking and they're very intellectual, then I will bring out the chessboard and I will ask them if they've ever done chest therapy, or if they would like me to explain it, or if they would even be willing to give it a go. And sometimes they say yes, sometimes they say no, because it sounds really boring. And I tell them it's anything but boring. And anyway, so it varies. So
You need play therapy as well, or just chest?
I'm not a play therapist. I have done some play therapy techniques. My age group that I know, well, my clientele, my specific clientele that I do is either people with chronic or terminal illness, or family members that have lost someone, so good counseling. As well as I have worked with people in correction or outside of corrections. So trauma and crisis. I have like one or two kids right now, but majority of my people are over 18.
What about, what would be your recommendation in how ordinary people like us can help society? Is it volunteering in a prison or at a counseling center, or, what are there some things that just your everyday person that's not a, licensed therapist, but, can offer society to help?
Yeah.
If you have any idea.
Yeah, so like your average lay person.
Yeah.
Lay helper. Yeah, I mean, there's so many, there's a whole entire website. I don't know the name of it. It's volunteerlist.com or something like that, where it has this massive list of volunteer opportunities. And many of those are interacting with people on any type of emotional level. So we at the suicide hotline take volunteers. So you get trained, you go through countless hours of training, and then you would talk with people on the alcohol and drug helpline in Oregon, on the suicide hotline, and literally save people's lives. Talk people off bridges, so many different scenarios, and it is a good feeling. A hard feeling, but a good feeling. So there's that. You can volunteer at corrections, things like that. My one thing is that if you are unable to physically be in a lockdown environment, maybe not corrections, because they have lockdowns frequently, and once they lock down, you're stuck where you're at for who knows how long. So there's that, and then honestly, one big thing that comes to my mind that's totally off the wall is volunteering at hospitals, just in NICU units, and going and holding babies. And when you hold the babies and cuddle with the babies, and you get to talk to their parents, and you get to build that relationship with parents, and becoming a volunteer at hospitals in general to go visit people. Like that's another big, massive thing. There's Boy, it's a
They
boy.
actually have hospice volunteers.
They do, yeah, yeah. So there's the hospice volunteers that have the hospice type training. Yeah, so I'm thinking of other specific ones. There's like, Boys and Girls Club, is that what it's called? Where you can do that and then kind of be a mentor to some young people. Those are all helpful, supportive, things that you could do without getting employed.
There's another one. Hold on.
Yes.
What is something you do to recharge after an intense session?
Ice cream. I 100% will share. I have ice cream at work and I have ice cream at home. Ice cream, yes, after intense sessions, so my self-care is very, very detailed and I do a lot of self-care. My jam is the Mount Hood. That's where I live. I live in Sandy, Oregon, which is at the base of the mountain. And I do a lot of mountain stuff. I have about 32 pictures of mountains throughout my house on my walls. And my sister said, I think you have enough. No, I don't. You never have too many pictures of mountains. Anyway, so anytime I go up the mountain is a wonderful time. It's just a lot of it's very calming and very relaxing. So I do that. I'm a musician. So I play piano and some other instruments and
beatbox.
beatbox. And beatbox on my way home, more than I should have been. But in my office at work, I do have a piano, so I just throw on my headphones and just go to town for however long I have. So that's very calming. Another super cool thing that I do is archery. I do target shooting. And when it comes to focusing and working with people with ADHD, this is actually fantastic because the second you pull the string back, you can't help all of your attention is focused on that arrow and where the arrow is going. And so all of the stressors of the day and the frustrations of life completely go out. And as soon as you pull back, you're just focused on that one thing, and then you just stand and then you let go. And it's just having that release. So having that pressure, you have that pressure, physical pressure here, and that mental pressure of focusing on the target. And as soon as you release, you have that physical release and that mental release as well. So that's very, very therapeutic. And then I sleep.
Yes, because I know Amber personally as well, and one thing that really inspires me about her is that she sets goals every year for herself. Like one year you saw 21 waterfalls or something?
50.
Okay, 50.
Yeah.
I hiked to 50 waterfalls.
That's amazing.
And another year you went around how many lakes?
22.
22 lakes. So she sets these really cool, I mean, they're kind of challenging.
Yeah.
And, but she always accomplishes them, and she has a lot of good support people in her life that do that with her, but I just find that inspires other people around her too, to set goals and go for them,
Yep. Dreams without goals are just dreams, and they just stay here until you make it a goal. And then when you make it a goal, you're still gonna be stuck in the train station until you kick the train in gear and you actually go. So you can have the engine running all you want. You can be talking about it all you want, but until you hit that accelerator or however the train works, they have accelerators. The button, I don't know, release the brake, whatever. Until you start going, you're gonna be stuck. So the best way to start is to start.